what are some of those limitations? So one of the things is that retrieve and refresh. So it behaves like a pivot table. So if you have experience with a pivot table, and anybody that doesn't, it's going to be going back to their office and like trying to find how to figure out how to use them. But if you have experience with a pivot table on the underlying spreadsheet, so say you've got an underlying spreadsheet, you built a pivot table on top of it. You go back to that underlying data and you change a number. You go back to your pivot table, none of the changes come through. You have to go up and hit refresh and get it to re-pull that information because it's going to recompute and recalculate. The cubes act the exact same way. You've got to tell it to do something to get it to do something. So that's one thing that's a little bit tricky. So you're going to see on some of your templates, you're going to see save and retrieve. The reason is that one of the reasons is because of that pivot table nature. There's other reasons too. The next thing is the hierarchies that we talked about, and alternate hierarchies, and the members of those hierarchies have to be maintained. Not that big a deal, but you do have to maintain. Clinical departments, you'll notice that you're actually going to be maintaining some of those hierarchies yourself. They're going to be called maintenance templates. So that's one part of it as well. The other thing is that just like in a pivot table, some of the details are lost at certain times. So depending on what you're looking at, some of the detail behind stuff is going to be lost. So in the OTPS template, you're not going to double click on something and pull up all the transactions that came in to support that number. It's just going to be a block number that's given to you. So that's one thing to recognize as well. The next thing is that integration means standardization. Whenever you throw out a big tent, you throw out a big net and try to capture everybody, you've got to be kind of standardized. So to make sure that everybody can use the system to the best of their benefit. So a good example I can think of is that in the HR template, when you click to add a new employee, the people in the basic sciences and centers are going to see something that says HSF UVA split. What do I need to know this for? Do you have an HSF UVA split? That's there for clinical users. So sorry about that. And then people on the clinical side are going to see things that are going to be weird because that's going to be there to accommodate their basic science and center colleagues. The next thing is that it's local. It uses your computer to make it fast. It's sneaky that way. So whenever you open up Internet Explorer and type in CBFRAS and the system comes up, CBFRAS if you're on a local computer. Whenever you go in and you type that in, it pulls it up and then it opens up the system. It's actually opening up a frame of Excel inside of Internet Explorer, and it's on your computer. So when you're in there typing in that spreadsheet, you're actually typing on a local spreadsheet on your computer. It's using your computer speed and computing power to make it faster. Tied into that, if you have heavy using systems up at the same time, like say Oracle or Discover running in the background, it's going to slow that down a little bit. So you got to realize that this system's running on your local. The only time it's ever talking back to the database is when you build a template or you hit save or you hit retrieve. That's the only time that it's going to be talking back and forth. Otherwise, you're completely local. So the other thing to take into consideration when thinking of this, the integration, is that the information is not going to talk back. So whenever you put in a budget, it's not going to automatically feed back into Oracle. So it's not magical on some level. It's integrated within itself, but not back to the source system. So that's a good thing to keep in mind as well. The next thing is it's a controlled environment. It is Internet Explorer dependent, so it has to operate inside that, and it uses web office components and to run itself. So like I said, you're opening up a frame of Excel inside of Internet Explorer. So no going over to Starbucks and filling out your budget on your iPad, unfortunately. I know you guys are impressed. So the other thing is you got to be behind the HSCS firewall. It is an HSCS server supported system, so you've got to be behind that firewall. So if you don't have VPN access to there, you've got to get that set up. The next thing, and this is going to sound like, I wonder if this is really a limitation, is this is going to change the budgeting playing field. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to become comfortable with financial modeling inside of the system. So a lot of times, I know in the old system, it sort of tended to get people to behave in a way where they model their budgets outside the system and then just input them into the system. I think people that are going to see the most benefit are the ones that are actually comfortable with using the system to do their financial modeling. And that's going to be something, that's going to be a skill that we're going to have to pick up. So it's a limitation currently because, remember, our critical components, right? The 1,200 cubic centimeters between your ears, that is the part that's going to be a limitation right now as we get used to using this new system, training ourselves on using it. Well, I went to fiscal administrators meeting a little over a month ago, Yoxon Reynolds was there. She gave a presentation. One of the things she talked about was the new administration and how that affects us, the new financial model too. So having a new president, a new chief operating officer, and a new provost, how does that affect us? And she said one of the things we're going to have to do is we're going to have to build new skills and write new reports. We're working on writing new reports, and right now you're learning new skills. So we're a little ahead of the curve of most of the other schools. So that's good news, but it's also a limitation in the short term, right? Because we've got to get our heads wrapped around how to use that. So now that I've got you all amped up and understand how the system's kind of set up, what it'll do for you, and some of its limitations, let's do a system overview. So let's take a look at the system and do a quick little system overview. The first thing is we're not going to actively open up the system. We're just doing screenshots today. So before we even get to the screenshots, let's take a look at a very, very simplified flowchart of the system. So how this works is there is a UPG side, which is here highlighted in orange, and then a SOM side, SOM-specific modules over here in blue, and then a shared module in the middle, which is clinical record, and then versioning, which is kind of a overlord module that exists over the entire thing. So we start from the bottom, kind of work our way up in this particular flowchart. So it starts with HR. Everything in UVA starts with HR, right? So so we start with HR. So we go in there, we check our demographics, and add our new hires, fire some people, play around in there. And then if we have providers that are coming out of the HR system, they go up to clinical revenue. Not everybody has providers that into the dash line. Go ahead and cover clinical revenue while we're on it. Clinical revenue gets modeled out here, and then from clinical revenue that flows over to our clinical budget. Take the revenue that we modeled out and then spend it on the budgeting side. If the HR piece flows up here as well. So whenever you do labor distribution, that information is going to flow over to your clinical budget. You'll see it on that side. And then fees that come from that flow over to UPG admin folks. And then clinical budgeting flows up to funds management. HRs, if you've got non-provider, all your non-provider information goes straight to funds management. If you have any commitments, if you have any startup packages or what have you from the dean's office, those are going to be housed in this little module right here. Those are going to affect what you can schedule on your HR side, and they're also going to affect what you can do in OTPS. OTPS is other than personnel services. You're going to enter that information in here. That's going to flow to funds management. And then at the end, you have a huge, Oprah aha moment in funds management, where you're going to put in the revenue that you're going to use to be able to spend that money and see what your total effect is across all fund sources. I know probably nobody in here is from UPG admin, but it's important to know that there's a whole UPG side of this stuff that you might never ever see. So they're going to pick up their capital planning, do their full admin budgeting and reporting, got left off there apparently, and then do their UPG financial reporting. So this is going to be their financial reporting system. It's going to pull from their GL and actually it's going to be how they produce their audited financial statements. So this is a big deal for these guys, and we'd be remiss to forget that. Also, the budget report, I don't really know where to put that guy. It's actually kind of somewhere in here, but it works up there as well. The budget report is a pretty slick little report that gives the information, the support for each employee by fund source, and then all of your OTPS by fund source. And your OTPS is going to be crunched up to expenditure categories. So that's kind of an end-all be-all for reports, and pretty neat how that one works as well. SOM allocations is kind of floating off on here in its own in this particular flow chart. This gets into the financial reporting. So in the allocations is how you're going to be able to allocate your overhead out to PIs and to physicians to do FRP type reporting, and also be able to use this to do some departmental reporting if you want to. So that's got some neat potential. That particular SOM allocations, that's in my module. Financial reporting is my module as a project lead, which I am for Clarity. That one takes a lot of brain power to wrap your head around. That one will get you spun around on yourself pretty fast. So so make sure you eat your Wheaties and drink your coffee on the day you decide to do that.